Okay, hello and welcome to our latest episode of Southside Stories. Just a quick reminder, if you're listening to this and you'd love to subscribe, well, I'd certainly love for you to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on your podcast platform of choice. We've got some great guests still to come in this current season. But with me today is Richard. Hi, Richard.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, and we were just talking earlier about what we've been up to, and the fact that spring is here, definitely here, which always makes us feel better, doesn't it?
Everyone at the moment.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it makes
a push towards summer.
Absolutely, makes a big difference. Richard, tell us a little bit about yourself, and a little bit about your company.
Well, I'm the black sheep of the PR world, and actually, I come from New Zealand, a country with 75 million sheep. In May '99, I arrived on these shores, not by boat, but by plane. I started out in advertising, actually, working for the Daily Express newspaper. Worked my way up the ranks. There's a lot of carnage going on, a lot of staff who were leaving at the time as the company had got purchased by Northern Shell, Richard Desmond. I was there before the takeover, and then it was my opportunity to climb the ranks to head of advertising for regions and international. And then I decided I've got to go out on my own. Become a PR guy. So it's an unusual route into PR, coming through advertising and sales, but I'm not the first person.
I guess you'd made a lot of... Did you make a lot of contacts, though, even if you're on the ad sales media side? Did you get to know a lot of journalists?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I got to know a lot of journalists within the organisation and other organisations, but also lots of clients that I could potentially leverage off. Some of the Dragon's Den people and people used to come and go into the building, from Philip Green through to Michelle Moan. They always used to be around. So, and I started doing a little bit of PR, even though that wasn't my brief, in the sense that if someone was spending enough money, maybe they could be editorially favoured or helped along. And because my portfolio was all the titles for regions and international, 9 staff, I knew about absolutely every title in the group, which was unusual because in the West End agency patch, every advertisement controller just dealt with their own patch, and I managed to have a knowledge of everything, so I could talk to entrepreneurs about the whole shebang.
Yeah, that's great. I must stood you in very good stead. Actually, it's interesting you mentioned Philip Green and Baroness Moan. We're going to talk about reputation later, because quite often when we look back at some of these time periods, we have a slightly different lens on people now, don't we? But we're going to come on to that. So you wanted to go out on your own. What was it about the PR though that particularly attracted you?
I quite like the idea. I mean, I just found it very limiting, filling white holes on pages with pre-designed copy. It was like, okay,
yeah.
And the big agencies knew where they wanted to be, and we had to go begging. And we at the Daily Express, we always felt like we were sort of underlings to the Daily Mail, which was our direct competitor in the mid-market. Mm-hmm. And we're always begging for a bit of disposable income and trying to take them out for lunches and drinks and all that. And I loved the interaction, but I thought, well, no, there's more to it. There's more to this than that. And the attraction of coming from New Zealand to Britain was always media. And I just thought that's the main deal, really. Content, editorial content.
Yeah, and it's only grown since then, although we're going to cover maybe a little bit about press versus digital and that changing landscape in a minute. So tell us, what kind of PR do you do? What do you specialise? Do you specialise in something? What do you do now?
Well, I specialise in a few areas, actually. The thread that ties it all together, though, so it's not scattergun, is that it's a no-nonsense, balls-out approach to getting coverage. And in this Trumpised world, never has it been more valuable to be able to break through the clutter and give the media what it wants to digest, which is basically, it's like putting a lot of salt and fat, but when you cook. And I know it sounds a terrible thing, but the media really is it's really competing with social media now. So if they can't scream louder than social and also get their eyeballs through clickbait, they're not alive. So they've got this weird competition now between social media and normal media, the digital channels. They're all digital first. They're all heading that way. Even the Daily Express now, the Guardian's been digital first for a long time. But they really have to outdo the social media viral trends themselves, because otherwise, who's going to go past their pay gate? So it's a quick and the dead, if you like. So my approach seemed a bit out of step at the beginning, of being a little bit more like a corporate publicist than a normal, boring, standard public relations officer. But now it's of its time, for sure.
Yeah, and we are long in the tooth enough to have grown up with media in the 70s, 80s, 90s and beyond. The days, I guess maybe the 90s and early noughties, when tabloid power was absolutely at its peak in terms of how does that look now? I mean, how important are the tabloids and the mid-market press now in PR, whether it's working with a celebrity or something else, versus, because of course everybody's got their own media platform now. How does that look?
Well, yeah, I suppose two things have happened. You've had that whole clamping down on the media in terms of the way they gather stories. So they're too frightened to do much. Otherwise, they could be accused of hacking and all the rest. So a lot of stories, even though you don't realise it, a lot of them are PR generated with the celebrity. So more often than you realise. They still have to look real. They still might be real, but they're well staged, if you like. So everyone's in on it. Because otherwise, if it looks like someone's done something untoward and breached privacy, the newspaper does not want any more bills for breaching privacy whatsoever. So it's kind of neutralised the media and made it much more of a cooperative environment between the PRs and the newspapers or the media outlets themselves. It's made it a little bit boring. They don't have the same level of clout or impact. I think that's because of the fracturing in the media, though, not just the Leveson inquiry. I just think the number of channels which people now get their media means that the Sun newspaper doesn't command what everyone thinks like it used to. The Sun newspaper has stopped publishing its circulation because it's probably thinking, wow, we don't want to reveal how few readers we actually have anymore. Yeah. So, it's a bit of a scramble going on.
Yeah, because it used to be like 2 to 3 million, didn't it? Its daily circulation.
It did, but the numbers for traditional
fraction of that now.
Newspapers are just dwindling significantly.
Yeah.
Mail Online's strong, but that's Mail Online, Daily Mail. How long the print edition will continue? It's up for debate, but I think there's a place for print and digital. But that's not so much the point. Your question was, how much does it lead the agenda? And it's still in there, but it's got to compete with social media.
Yeah. Tell us then a little bit about, we trailed this a little bit around crisis PR. And there is not a shortage of crisis moments, is there, either for brands? We've got Marks and Spencer's, as we talked today in the news, a huge outage in their systems, possibly due to hacking. And then, of course, around individuals at the BBC and other celebrities. I mean, the list is a long one, right, around PR. Tell us a little bit about, maybe just to kick us off, perhaps, can you name or reference any of the crisis situations that you've been in and been managing?
I've been involved in part or all of a lot of the crises. Even in the early days of the Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp, I was brought in by the lawyers for Amber Heard. I don't really like how it all played out for her in the long run, but I was working on that. 9 or 10 months I was representing PR for Rose McGowan, who was the Harvey Weinstein whistleblower. She published a book, and we all know how all that went. And UK press seemed to be an angle that she wanted because she liked the credibility of being in the UK. She was living in the UK for a period, about a year, and she was leading the agenda globally by epicentering her stories out of the UK. And so because of that, I was representing a PR out of the UK. So all sorts of things, even down to the Charles Saatchi. I was on the Charles Saatchi side during the Saatchi-Nigella fallout. Yeah. Everyone remembers that about a decade ago.
Yeah.
So I've been in the white water.
Yes, sounds it.
Paddling.
Tell us a little bit
upstream. What's that?
Tell us a little bit about how you approach it then. So if somebody comes to you for whatever reason, they are in the news, for a reason perhaps they don't want to be in the news for, how do you start perhaps dealing with them to start with, but also how do you sort of manage the situation and start to get a strategy around solving whatever problem they've come to you with?
I think quite often with crisis communications, it tends to be the lawyers that help the client direct, because they feel like, wow, everything's swallowing me alive. They're not going to go and ring a publicist to make them feel better from that point of view. However, I think the lawyers quite often realise that they need someone out there fighting their corner on their behalf, because the last thing they feel like doing when they're getting squashed is going out into battle with the media. So that it's not an advised thing. So it's quite often the actual the lawyers working in conjunction with the crisis PR, and quite often I've been brought on by the lawyers. I mean, I met Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy. He'd had his Wi-Fi and his telephone line cut off, but it was through Doughty Street Chambers, who represented him, that brought me on to be his eyes and ears and PR, because he couldn't communicate. So it was, again, an example of lawyers and PRs working together. And obviously, there's two approaches. Obviously, you want to deflect and keep things out of the news, which is becoming increasingly difficult nowadays. In the old days, with people like, the notorious PR Max Clifford, who died, he was always sort of the guy that could ring an editor and stop a story running. But, efforts to superinjunct and all the rest don't seem to really work with the internet and the internet age. So you can kind of stall it, but you can't stop it. So the PR's role becomes, right, how do we deal with it now? It's inevitably going to be everywhere. And bad news has a habit of spreading really, really rapidly. The worse it is, the more it spreads.
So you have a lawyer or a celebrity or somebody that comes to you, we've got this issue. What do you first start? How do you first start kind of analysing the situation and then thinking about what is my first sort of engagement with the media going to be? Give us a flavour of what that sort of looks like. And I know every situation is probably very different, isn't it? But...
I think what the media need is a defined sequence of narratives, and if you want to be sure they're going to follow the right sequence, then you tend to write them yourself and try and get friendly journalists to put them into the paper. They might take the narrative in a different direction from the narrative that's currently there. But before doing that, it really is important, and this is what a lawyer would do as well, is to get to the bottom of what the facts are, and really, really dissect what's going on, and the first thing is to try and own up to as much of it as possible, because the worst thing you can do is have a whole lot of stuff hidden in a drawer and someone's going to discover it, and it's never going to go away. It's never going to stop being a problem. If the news agenda is to constantly reveal more and more updates about things that the said client has been trying to hide, that's the worst thing. So you really want to come out and say as much of it as possible. Get it all out there in the open straight away. And it's the same technique since PR began. The ones that don't do that get themselves buried alive, basically.
Yeah, we've seen, I probably won't name them, but I think we've all seen examples of that, haven't we, where, I don't know, a story just runs and runs because there's a constant, somebody is revealing, or a friend of a friend, or somebody's leaking something, or somebody hasn't been honest, and then and then the whole cycle starts all over again and keeps repeating.
Exactly. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, why is something a one-day story and then vaporizes, and why is something just in the news forever and never seems to go away? And it's because there always seems to be so many things that are unanswered. So it sounds extremely basic to call it like a whodunit or, some sort of crime drama, but it's like, the less you know, the longevity of the story while we unpack and try and investigate and work it out. And the audience, they would never admit it, but they're fascinated with consuming the bits and pieces that allow them to put the puzzle together and finally work out the solution. If the solution is worked out right at the beginning, wow, the heat's come out straight away.
Yeah.
Where are we going to go from here? He's basically admitted it all straight away. Or she, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about, because obviously you must have people that are quite distressed, don't you, or worried or anxious.
Yeah.
How do you work with them, those at a personal level?
I suppose they quite appreciate, it's like a good physio, I suppose, when you feel knotted up and they just take charge and they put you at ease because they seem to know what they're doing. So it'd be like an eye surgeon. You don't really want to know where they're cutting every incision. You have to trust them. But if they don't feel like they can trust you, they get even more perplexed. But I have a certain way of being that I see narrative. It's almost like an X-ray vision. I can reveal what I think is going on and what needs to happen to sort it, and they realise why, because I'll explain very clearly what should happen and why. It always relates to what's happening in the general news agenda anyway. I know it sounds crazy, but you're not in isolation. If your story's been done before, the media loses its appetite for more of the same if they think, oh, we've seen that before. So if you can create parallels or work with what's out there and explain that to the client, and to them it's a bit like, what do you mean? This seems like a falsified world. But that's media. That's how it all works. It's a whirlpool. But I think they just trust a no-nonsense approach. So my approach is a little bit cut to the bone and say it as it is. And if you're having an act like Bill Murray, everyone loves him because he just sort of says it in a sort of just straight out there with it. And I tend to do that rather than trying to be all masterful and hiding everything and them getting not sure what's happening. I'm the opposite to that, which probably helps coming from down under from my own personal brand point of view. New Zealanders are known for being quite straight talking.
Yeah. Do you, I mean, back to the media, do you ever need or as part of the strategy offer sort of exclusive access to somebody in a crisis situation or not?
When you say, do I offer them exclusive access?
Yeah, well, the media title. I mean, I'm thinking here a bit of, Prince Andrew and Newsnight. I mean, obviously that backfired spectacularly. But sometimes you see somebody's in the eye of the storm, and they do an exclusive, sit down with the Daily Mail or something like that.
Well, that was a backfire, yeah, for sure. I think the media themselves like to feel like they've got an exclusive. It's not so much an exclusive of the individual, though. It's an exclusive of a piece of information. So, and then they're quite happy being exclusive as the broadcaster or exclusive as the newspaper. So you can break down that exclusive. But there is a general obsession by the media to be first. But the 24-hour news cycle has compressed it all. So you say exclusive and you put embargoes on things, and that kind of is almost out the window now. I mean, everything is just sped up so much that exclusive, it's almost a throwaway word now. Everything that says exclusive, it's lost its meaning to a large degree.
Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about, again, I'm showing my age a bit, but I guess in the old days, you'd have, let's say Paul Gascoigne had done something, a paper would have some exclusive with him. They would squirrel him away in a hotel somewhere so he couldn't talk to anybody. But that was driven by, the banner headline on the newsprint the next day and driving sales with tabloids.
It was the contracts as well, because they would pay big money for the exclusive. They'd be paying £40,000 to £100,000 for the story, and they want to keep it under wraps. They want to be sure no one else can get it. So the whole theatre of that was protecting their exclusive. But, since in the last 10 years, the value of content, the newspapers has come down so much. I mean, you could be giving them a story and they don't want to pay you more than £750 to £1,500. This could be the Sun. In the old days, it might be 50,000. So I think that's the nature of exclusive. But everything's a commodity. The newspaper is a commodity. The stories were commodities. Now they've reduced a lot in value. Yeah.
Let's move away from the crisis side to more about securing positive news coverage and, earned media. Yes. Tell us a little bit about that. Maybe, again, perhaps an example of somebody that you've worked with that wants to cultivate, for whatever reason, a really positive, perhaps longer term media profile.
Yes, well, I suppose we've worked with Football for Peace, which was backed by Prince William. And we got Mesut Ozil to launch a special centre in Bradford for young kids, and that got massive global traction. And Kash Siddiqui, the co-founder, benefited from that because it was Mesut Ozil's name, and that was massively helpful. And it's more of a challenge because they're working very closely with the United Nations, and the United Nations brief us to talk about rehydrating the earth, which seems unusual for football, but there's a thing next week that I'm involved in promoting. Harry Redknapp's coming, and Paul, all these different footballers. I've got the child prime minister because I represent the Children's Parliament. So I'm attaching different media assets that I have some level of control over into something. But overall, it's a very positive giving back, sustain the earth, do good strategy. But to achieve any type of level of media traction means looking at the different ecosystems, bringing them all into the table, and trying to. It's like cooking something with lots of different ingredients, I suppose. It's a different approach, positivity to negativity, though, I have to say.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about the Children's Parliament. That sounds interesting. What is that?
Well, it is interesting. It got co-founded by myself and the late Sir David Amess, who was the Conservative MP who tragically died in October 2021. And we had devised earlier the year he died to launch this virtual Children's Parliament, and got Microsoft to sponsor it. And I had the client Wakelet, which is an edtech platform linked with Microsoft. Anyway, so the idea is kids from all around the nation can get together online, sit on the green benches, but they're all virtual. And we announced that this is the best way for young people to get involved in democracy, because kids had been turning off democracy for years. They didn't really believe in it so much anymore. So this would be driving home that. And it was such a big uptake with the kids. And the MPs were matching themselves to the kids through competitions. And we announced it, Boris Johnson announced it as a pre-COP26 event. And there's about almost 600 kids came on from Belfast to Penzance, and they're all debating, and we had an amazing environment. And then, tragically, just before we actually launched, Sir David Amess was stabbed to death, and it was a chilling moment. And we had to decide, should, out of respect for him, cancel this, or should we continue? And we had a moment where we thought, well, what would he want us to do? So we continued, and we've been doing it for 4 years almost as his legacy, and it's evolved. So we're in a transition period now where capital companies getting involved to help fund what will become either a CIC or charity. There'll be critical thinking games. There's actually, if you go on Sky News this week, there's an item on the FYI show for kids where the child prime minister and the child chancellor have been 3D scanned to be turned into avatars so they can go into a critical thinking role play like they do in Parliament, but doing it in virtual worlds, not just the Parliament, but all sorts of places. So anyway, so that's actually on air right now. It's morphed and evolved, but it now getting the lid put on, so it's not just a labour of love, it's got governance and structure and trustees and all the rest. Otherwise, it's me just plate spinning, and it can't be that.
Well, that sounds a great initiative. Also, you've worked with some very flamboyant people over the years in the fashion industry. I think Vivien Westwood, you worked with her for a long time.
Yeah, she was a remarkable woman. I worked with her for about 8 years, doing a lot of work for her. Her passion was activism and all the causes she believed in, and I represented that PR for her. So environmental activism, human rights, and then that bridged into the Julian Assange freedom of speech as well. And because she came from the punk era, my no-nonsense but also extreme stunts, which I seem to like to do, she loved them. So no matter what level of temperature I turned things up to, she would agree. She'd be one of the few clients that would agree without any hesitation, or maybe say, can we just push it up a bit more, a few more notches? So it's the opposite to some clients that get a bit frightened of things. But I've done things like take a tank to the Prime Minister's house in Oxfordshire, and she was in the cockpit, and it went global.
I think I remember that, yeah.
40th anniversary of Sex Pistols Anarchy in the UK was being celebrated by the Museum of London, but her son, to Malcolm McLaren, said he's going to burn his £5 million punk collection. So I organised the PR, and on the River Thames, he was on a barge and he burned all the collection. There's like 200 media on the sides. That was in 2016. So all these sort of perfect storms, if you like, here I am creating the perfect storm with Vivien Westwood being the celebrity component, but the narrative and all the elements had to come together, because just having a celebrity by themselves doesn't automatically make the media feast, if you see what I mean. Now, I even had her dangling outside the Old Bailey to try and get Julian Assange released in a fetish cage. She was hanging like a canary in a cage, that sort of thing.
Do you think generally, I mean, coming back to the sort of current day, do you think that people are more cautious now, that they're a little fearful perhaps of doing things like that? Or, yeah.
They are and they aren't in a way, because I think in some ways they're more cautious and more alarmed, but it's almost it's so alarming what's going on that it kind of whites out their fear, and they're resigned as well. So they start by being quite alarmed, but very quickly it turns to, okay, we better do something. Okay, I trust you. Not that they really know me that well, but what are they going to do? So they resign to a solution, because what's worse, just watching something escalate, you're not going to be able to micromanage it anymore. I was talking to a colleague in New Zealand who said the nature of brands now, they've all become appropriated by fans or the public or creators, bloggers. You're no longer in charge of your own brand. So what are you going to do? You trust the person that can steer your brand, because you've lost control anyway. So you're in a way, you're calmer, because it's going to get worse if you don't just allow someone who knows what they're doing to just get on with it.
Yeah. What about the role of influencers these days? Does that show up in your world at all?
It's a strange one, the influencers. It's like, I think there's going to be a shakedown. At the moment, it's very messy. The volume of influencers is going through the roof. Everyone's thinking they're going to make a fortune. Now AI is doing all the heavy lifting, so they don't even have to caption their own video content, which means the volume of content is going through the roof. Now you've got AI movies, and there's going to come a point where I think the authentic experience, people are going to find the nostalgic brands that have had longevity and come back to them, and they're going to trust media experiences that are at least hybrid of happening live with digital augmenting it, or the aftermath could be chatted about, that type of thing. Because the sheer volume, people are just getting lost. They don't know what to think anymore. And everyone's feeling like I don't think people really want to be in their own private universe. We're a tribal, and the idea that everyone's been given an algorithmic view of the world, and they just sit in their own bubble, seeing the things that the algorithms think you want to see. When you kind of find out that no one else is seeing that, you think, I don't want to be lost in space like that. I want to be part of something else. And I think the authentic human creators will come back as a rebellion to us being force-fed all this AI stuff. But having said that, if AI becomes more invisible, I think it will always be there, and it will always make things easier for us. But the idea of us just surrendering to being stuck in a pod, being given the same types of content from Netflix, because like the Spotify telling you what songs you like because of the first 500 you like, you'll only ever hear the same types of songs. There's nothing, it's like being in a room with an air conditioning unit. It's never bringing in any fresh air.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Our instincts are to rebel against that and go with a tribal community experience, a real experience. And I think there's a massive pushback. And I think young people are pushing back already. Young people are getting into religion and Christianity more. They're just not accepting everything they're being force-fed, and that's hopeful in many ways.
Yeah, it is. Who do you think does PR really well? I'm thinking about individuals again now, but who do you think has consistently managed, their profile really well?
I think the people that seem to manage their PR the best seem to always self-deprecate and realise they have an awareness of what people are saying about them. I mean, I've been critical of Mark Zuckerberg from Meta Facebook in the past, but you see him on Joe Rogan. He's happy to be completely open and honest, and he's quite self-deprecating, and he reveals lots of facts about how he's only done things because he was forced to. And it kind of honesty and that conversation, I think people really relish that, to be honest. So he's not standing there lecturing people. He's not being pious. He's just being honest. Over time, I like Tony Robbins as well, because he's the power of one.
Yeah.
People like that are quite solid as their image. He's quite conservative leaning, but he's down the middle, maybe right of centre, but he's someone you trust. He's someone that is consistent in their communication as well. Someone that never deviates from their core principles.
So consistency, honesty, a little bit dash of self-deprecation. Those are some of the ingredients.
Behind the scenes vibe, so you get to know the real person.
Yeah, good stuff. Great. Let's talk about your agency just to wrap up with. What are your plans? What's next for you, Rich, this year? Any exciting things, any plans, particular things cooking that you're excited about?
Well, I think the evolution of PR and the PR in its traditional form is now fading. And if PR, if you look at marketing as the umbrella, there's lots of disciplines that come under marketing, from PR to sales to publicity. So I think everything's going to evolve into content, and people who put money into an agency would rather see results for sure, rather than thinking it's just to get someone to write a press release and hope for the best and fire it out there, or keep things out of the paper. So I think there's going to be more of a blurring or a forging of something new. And I would like to think a content agency is the evolution of what I've been doing for 20 years, which is news-led, but has a good social purpose and protects the planet and protects society. And that might be wrapped up in doing a no-nonsense approach. The Children's Parliament is quite disruptive. It's quite no-nonsense. It's allowing kids to have a voice no matter what side of the political debate they are. And then in this society, which some people have accused of stopping kids having a voice, letting them have a voice is quite a disruptive thing. But it's a content island, the Children's Parliament. And I would like to think that there are a few others like that change the course of events, if you like, through media partnerships, creators coming on board, brands coming on board, creating these islands of content, like the Children's Parliament. It's a little bit secret how to describe it, much more than what I've just said, but I think that's where PR should go. It's a little bit of a merge of everything.
Great. And final question. Is there a leader or a PR figure or somebody who's had the biggest impact on you, do you think, professionally?
Well, I know it's almost a cliche to talk about Sir Winston Churchill. I know Boris Johnson has always seems to have sort of taken as many of his attributes as he can, having the same posture, even writing a book on Winston Churchill. But he seems to be someone that embodies, he stands up in the face of evil and adversity and holds firm. And if you're going through hell, keep going, he said. So, he was the greatest PR. He was an inspirer. He had his faults. He went away and came back. He evokes all of the elements of classical narrative cinema in its great form. And I think he stands the test of time. So he's the great leader and PR, in my opinion.
Great. Churchill. You can't get a better way, perhaps, to finish than on Churchill. That's great. Richard, thank you so much. That was really fascinating. Lots of great stuff in there. Thank you so much for spending some time.
Thank you.